Hello, welcome to Fluoride-Free Campaign special interview with Brenda Stuadenmaier. She is one of my favorite activists and advocates for fluoride-free world. And I've known her for quite a long time. And lately, she's done something wonderful, something extraordinary with the other activists that I want to make sure to get on the record and that we can all learn from and be inspired by Brenda and the small team she put together. So say hi, Brenda.
Hey, how are you?
So good. Oh, and we should also say, you have a very important role in the TSCA case, the Fluoride Action Network versus the Environmental Protection Agency. Tell us just a little bit about that.
Sure. I'm one of the plaintiffs in the federal lawsuit against the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency over the neurotoxicity of fluoride chemicals that are added to the public drinking water supply. And we're using TSCA, which is the Toxic Substances Control Act, for our lawsuit. And we have a bunch of nonprofits involved. We have the Fluoride Action Network, Moms Against Fluoridation, Food and Water Watch. Who else? And then there's a few other moms, and then our children are plaintiffs as well.
Thank you so much for doing that. It's critical. Obviously, it's been going on for a few years. Court cases can drag out. In fact, we have a transcript of the most recent hearing where the case had been in like mothballs almost, because waiting on some new studies to come out, and now that study's supposedly out. So the judge said, "Okay, let's get on with it." And that transcript is on the International Fluoride-Free Teleconference Library now. And people can read up on that and get the latest on the TSCA case. But thanks for being out there and putting your name on there, you and your family's name right out there for the whole world to see. And thanks so much for this recent work you're doing. So tell us a little bit about how this public comment came about and what you saw as possible and how you organized people and just all the great things.
Sure. So yesterday, the US EPA has a National Drinking Water Council. It's an advisory council to them, and they had a meeting. It was mostly focused on lead and copper, but I made sure to make a comment, and a bunch of other people as well, discussing how the fluoride chemicals in the public drinking water supply, in their raw form, they have trace amounts of lead and arsenic, which the US EPA has a maximum contaminant level goal of 0 for both of these elements. And also, some people at the comment session spoke about how fluoride will leach lead and copper fixtures and stuff like that. So everybody, it was a beautiful event. It was kind of like an orchestra. It started with Dr. David Kennedy from the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology. And then Dr. Bill Hersey spoke about his experience working at EPA and then with fluoride over the years. And he talked about the NTP report. So the judge in our case is waiting on the NTP report. NTP is the National Toxicology Program. And they did a systematic review on fluoride and released a draft in 2019. And then it went through peer review, and they were supposed to, from my understanding, release the final document in 2020. That's typically how NTP operates. Instead of releasing the final document, they released it in another draft version. And in both of those drafts, it concluded fluoride is a presumed neurotoxicant hazardous to human health. And so it went back for another round of peer review. It was supposed to come out like every few months in 2020, in 2021, 2022. Like all we did was like hold our breath, waiting for that peer review monograph to come out. And it never came out. And now the judge is waiting for it. The director of NTP came out and submitted documents to the court saying that this peer-reviewed systematic review may never see the light of day. He is deciding if it's going to be released in 2023 or not. But it was finalized in May. But we have these internal emails from CDC and Health and Human Services discussing the monograph, and we know that they've seen it. They redacted all the pages of the document in these emails that we got, but they were crafting talking points in like May and June and July because this report was going to come out. And so it hasn't come out yet. So Dr. Hersey spoke about that yesterday and how bizarre, this is really bizarre and not usual of NTP to not release a review that they've done. I think it started this review in like 2016. I think it was the Fluoride Action Network that nominated this review to be done. And, it seems like if your government spends all that time, that's almost 7 years. If they're spending that much time writing a document and then to withhold it from the public seems kind of bizarre. So
Very suspicious.
yeah.
Very suspicious. So yesterday, what was the name of this group that you were speaking to? The EPA is an enormous organization. Was it some specific committee, or just kind of map it out for me? Who are these people you were speaking with?
So the Drinking Water Advisory Council is a committee of the EPA. And it's made up of a bunch of different utility workers, college professors. I don't remember exactly who's all in this committee.
You caught them when you needed to. So just run us through how it played out. Was it you who first had the idea and then you contacted the others? I want to give people a kind of a picture, because the average activist out there is needing to know what to do, how to end fluoridation in their town. And one of the things that people come across is public comment, whether it's their city council, their county commissioners, the water board. There's a lot of different opportunities to address our elected officials and our appointed officials, people who make decisions about the drinking water in our towns. And so it's a really easy way for activists to get involved initially, because it doesn't cost anything, doesn't take anything. You are online this time, but for some people, maybe it might mean going downtown to the city hall at a certain hour when public comment is open. And so many commissions, so many bodies, public bodies require, in fact, as a matter of law, it's written into the legislation that before you make certain decisions, you have to provide an opportunity for public comment. And these public comments, people line up, they come in, they sign up, they line up in one way or another, whether it's online, you have to get into an online line, or physically stand in line and wait your turn. And in most cases, these public comment periods only allot a certain number of minutes for each person. It's a really popular way for people to get involved. I've seen so much video online, different edited quick videos of people taking exception with their elected officials in so many matters, in particular like school boards a lot lately. I've seen people, and they're very active, and it gets a lot of energy going. And I've also heard that in one way or another, you're not really even intending to speak. Your primary audience isn't the elected officials in front of you on the panel in front of you. Instead, it's the audience that you're speaking to. You're trying to educate anyone who might be tuning in. Maybe they're coming for another reason or another topic, and there's a whole bunch of people watching, and it gives you an opportunity to get your message out to a wider audience. So there's all these things that are really great about doing public comment. We don't always know, and sometimes the effect isn't as great as we'd like it to be. But I want to hear from your story to help people when they're sitting at home thinking, oh, could I do a public comment? And do I need to do it alone, or can I do it with others? And if I do it with others, how do I coordinate with them? And so that's why I want to hear your story, and as a way of instructing people is the best way to do this. And of course, get the inspiration from you being the great activist that you are.
Well, one thing that I use a lot is Google Alerts. You can set up a Google alert for different keywords, and fluoride is one of my keywords. So I think it was Alpena, Michigan recently discussed fluoride or getting rid of the chemicals because there's a chemical shortage. And so they were like, let's get rid of this program. And I saw, that they had a meeting coming up. I tuned into the meeting. I made a comment. There must have been, a 2 or 3 minute or 5 minute time limit. One thing to remember when you're speaking and you prepare something, I always try to figure out, okay, how many words can I fit in that amount of time? So I usually Google how many words are in a 5-minute speech. And then I try to keep it as close to it as possible. And I try to even make it a little bit shorter. And when I write my speech, I try to put big gaps in it so I remember to breathe. Because when I get so nervous and I start to tremble and shake, and I just start to get faster and faster and faster, and especially if you've rehearsed your piece enough, I forget to breathe. And then by the time I get to the end, I'm like gonna pass out because I haven't breathed in this, whole time. I try to make it shorter than I should, because there's so many times that I go to make public comment and other people are going over and they get cut off in the, the last sentence or whatever. So try to make it short.
Yeah, I noticed that even the folks with you yesterday, they're getting cut off, and I'm not sure what. Sometimes I thought that people felt that important to use up every second, and I don't know if that's really the idea. Even though it's a sense of limited time, doesn't mean you have to use up every second. I think it would be more effective if you make your point, finish in your time, and make your point in that period of time, finish, and then be done. And then that way they digest what you say and they aren't trying to kick you off and a half-baked thought.
Mm-hmm.
So that's important. That's a really good tip. Thank you.
Yeah, and slow it down. I make little breaks in there and say, breathe, pause. Like I make notes for myself just so that it gives people the opportunity to digest it, because there's so much information that people have never heard before. And if you go too fast, it just goes over their head and their eyes glaze over. So try to slow down, like make your point. So when I spoke yesterday at that, the EPA National Drinking Water Advisory Council meeting, I made my speech on a slideshow PowerPoint. So then I had to go to the next slide, and that allowed me a little break, because if I put it on one sheet, I would have read it way too fast and they wouldn't have been able to, grasp the things that I was saying as well. But it's so hard to when I first wrote that, I had over 500 words and I was like, man, I need this to be less than 300 words. And so it's just how do I simplify? How do I hack this out? And there's just so many things that you want to say, but in 3 minutes, you just can't. And so it's good to organize with other people who are also going to come and to say, this is what I'm going to talk about, even to share your Word document with other people ahead of time so they can see what you're writing about, and then they can write about something else. They can repeat some of those points to, reinforce them, but then to not, replicate everything that you just said. So there's still new information, and it works kind of like an orchestra. Like everyone has their little piece that they're putting into the puzzle. And so I was really proud of yesterday. I thought it worked out really well. And that Natalie woman that ended at the end, she's from Moms Against Fluoridation. She was amazing.
Yes.
She was it was a perfect closing person for our issue, I thought.
Yeah, I'll make sure to include that file with this instructional video, so that people can see an example of an amazing planning and execution. Just one after the other. And as you're saying, you didn't repeat yourselves. It was as if you built upon what you were saying, or in some cases, one speaker would go into detail about the leaching of lead, for example. So one person would just mention leaching of lead among other problems with fluoridation, and then I forget who it was, just went really deep on lead leaching in particular. So that way people got a real education over 5 3-minute speeches, 15 minutes, I guess, in total. And so whereas you maybe the individual thinks I got to get 15 minutes into 3 minutes, you don't have to with the team. So let's even just start back. you take it for granted that you would write your thing. But I think some people think they can just walk up there and spontaneously start talking. And I've seen examples of that online as well. So, people are passionate, and some people like to just speak off the cuff. I don't know that we can recommend it, or would want to recommend that people just walk in, without preparing too much and just speaking from their heart, so to speak.
I can't do that because as soon as I see like a bunch of eyes looking at me and faces, like everything goes blank. And like what comes out of my mouth is just like mumbling, and like the first thing that is just not coherent. It's a mess. So I have to write it down. And it's even good to just like keep a list of keywords by your side. That was really helpful too, because a lot of times at these city council meetings, they'll ask you follow-up questions to what you said. And so I just like to keep references and stuff sometimes. And then you can always follow up with an email as well, saying, well, let me get back to you. Or if you don't know the answer to a question they ask you, just always say, you know what, let me get back to you with the correct information, because I don't want to give you misinformation. And that's always really helpful to follow up with an email of some of the things that you said, or to provide resources for them. And when you reach out, don't write them a book. They don't want to read a book. They don't want to know everything that you know about fluoride. Like, keep it short, something sweet that they can digest, because a lot of these people have a million other issues on the agenda, and every week they have different issues on the agenda. Every day they have new people coming with new problems, and they have to educate themselves on all these new things all the time. Like, they're not going to be an expert on fluoride. They're not going to read your book. Keep it short and sweet and just to a few points. That's what I found is really helpful.
Thank you. Well, let's talk about that. What can we expect, even in the best case scenario? If you have a wonderful group of people like yourselves yesterday, having thought it out, wrote it out, coordinated with each other, delivered it, elegantly. All of you were reading. It was clear that you had thought about it. You had prepared it. It was clear to the audience that you all had put thought into it, and you were delivering this with, a lot of integrity. So then what's the best thing we can expect to happen?
Expect rejection. I have found that these are little battles in the war, as you would say, and kind of anticipate that you're not going to win the little battles, but we will win in the end. We will win this war, whatever you want to call it. We should give it a more positive word than war. But it's just, we have all the science on our side. We have truth on our side. Eventually it'll prevail, right? I mean, but it's been going on for 77 years. It's just really hard with all these dogmatic, people that are in this. There's entire lobbies, these lobbying organizations that have funding behind them to, fly from Florida into your city council meeting and talk about how you don't know what you're talking about. That's bad science. That science was done in another country, doesn't apply to us. It's comparing apples to oranges, yada, yada, yada. They're the experts. They know everything about fluoride. You don't know anything. They will be the first to tell you if there's a problem with it. So just trust them. They have, dentist or whatever their credentials are, DDS or after their name. So you can expect to just be kind of drugged through it. This is not for everyone. You got to be good at rejection. It's just got to be, just anticipate it and don't let it break you down. You got to be really good at pulling yourself back up over and over again. Because the people that are the decision makers, they don't really want to think, and they don't want to really think for themselves. And so they're going to go with whatever the health department says, or so they don't have to think and do their job. But eventually we're going to win. We're eventually going to get through to the health departments. I don't know how, but I think we will. I think the science will eventually get through to them, because there are, like, it's a growing number of highly esteemed scientists that are every day. There's new and more scientists that are waking up. They're reading the literature. That's all you got to do is read the science. Get the science in the hands of those who understand it and who are credentialed enough that they can back you. You know, I found it really helpful to get my university professors and my local tech school instructors who teach like biochem and biology and chemistry and stuff like that. I make sure that they read all these studies. Even like the microbiology professors and stuff, like they see, you know, a study from, you know, published in JAMA Pediatrics, and they find that, you know, highly credible. And, you know, they see these studies are funded by the NIH. There's multiple studies funded by the NIH now. Finding fluoride is neurotoxic to the brain. So you just got to get these studies into the right hands of the people that can help you. And you just start building your network. Like, I have showed up to so many different events, local events, anything on the environment, anything on water. There's so many different environmental problems in every community that you can start getting involved with, start going into those meetings. PFAS, that's a fluorinated compound that is a big hot topic. And there's a lot of health departments that are holding these meetings about PFAS to the community. So I make sure I go there. And then I talk to the directors of the health department or the epidemiologist from the health department or whoever, like, just start talking, talk your issue. I talk fluoride with everyone. Everywhere I go, I talk about fluoride. And it's really amazing to see how many people then like know about fluoride. Like Wisconsin will probably be one of the first states that the issue of the neurotoxicity, I think, will gain some traction. Like, I got one of the health department, I think it was a head for the state. He knows Dr. Grandjean and Dr. Bruce Lampier, you know, like he personally knows these people and has worked with them in the past on lead and different issues. Now he's retired and he's like, yeah, this fluoride, like I can't vote to support it. You know, he's on a drinking water advisory committee for for Madison, Wisconsin here. And he's like, I can't vote to support this because of the neurotoxicity issue. I know the authors of these studies, like this is legit evidence that it's harmful. You just got to keep going. Like, I've been working on this issue for, I want to say, almost 10 years of just showing up at conferences and talking to people. I go to the conferences for all the drinking water operators and employees in the state, like WWOA, that's wastewater. AWWA, that's the drinking water conference. So I just show up to these conferences, and if not everybody wants to go to these conferences and they're expensive to get in. I have a job that they'll cover my registration. But if you're a student, you can get into conferences super cheap as a student. I mean, it might be $25 to get in, but you can get into conferences that cost like $500 to get in, and you can get in for like $25. And then just start talking with the vendors, start talking with the speakers, you know, bring information for people, whatever you want to do, but just keep talking, and then you'll start to gain traction. It takes a long time and it's a lot of hard work. I thought fluoride was going to be the easiest thing to get rid of because there was just so much science showing it was harmful. And I thought, this is crazy. Why would anyone keep this program going? Well, there's all the science. But then I found out really quickly, because I took all the science and brought it forward to decision makers that can, you know, make the changes. And when I showed up, there were all these people there that were promoting it, and they were against what I had to say. And I didn't even know how they found out I was going to be there, and like how they knew that, you know, they had traveled for hours away. Like they came from Milwaukee and Madison and all over the place, just to tell me that I didn't know what I was talking about. That was bad science. They have the best science on their side, yada, yada, yada. But then you got to look at their science that they use. A lot of times they don't show their science. They have some nice nicely crafted like propaganda materials or promotional materials, and look at the sources on it. A lot of it's from the CDC or the American Dental Association, ADA. And if you look at the sources, like look at the dates on them and how dated it is. Like the American Dental Association put out like their fact book on fluoride, but look at the sources in it. It's like 1950 something, 1960 something. Like you're lucky if you can find something from like 2010. It's all like old science that they're using, and they're counting on people not reading it, not understanding it. And you have to have a really thick skin. Like I thought it was going to be really easy to get rid of fluoride, and here I am 10 years later still doing it. And I even said something to someone, one of my friends, and I said, if I'm still doing this in like 3 years, I'm going to quit, and I'm just going to take all my money and buy like a whole home filter system and filter it all out. And then I'll just give water to all my friends so nobody has to drink it. But, another 7 years later, here I am still doing this.
Thank
like,
God.
Remember back in 2014 when you said,
Thank God you're still with us. Yes, you're definitely a role model of someone who doesn't quit, even if you have to break your own word. But I like setting goals as well. So 3 years, let's make a new goal. From 3 years from now, we're going to get this out, right?
I hope it's just 2 more years. Somebody, I forget if it was yesterday in that meeting or if it was some other meeting that I was in, but somebody said that in 2015, was it 2015 when Health and Human Services did that report on fluoride to lower the level from 1.0 to 1.2 down to 0.7. It took them, I think, 8 years to lower that. Like they knew it caused dental fluorosis, and they were discussing that for 8 years before they actually like lowered the level. So like government's really slow. And so we know fluoride is neurotoxic. I don't know if it's going to take EPA like 15 years. They just like fast tracked their lead and copper rules, and it took over 15 years to fast track that. So I don't know. I hope it's just like 2 more years and everyone will know, and it won't be cool to put it in the water anymore, and it'll just be, everyone will get rid of it. Or the country's going to run out of fluoride with all the shipping issues that they have right now and the shortages, and the price has gone up a lot. So there's a lot of small communities want to get rid of it because of the cost. But then those dental promoters are like, well, we can get you a grant from the CDC. We'll pay for whatever you need. Just let us know what you need and we'll get it for you. There's so many vested interests that have dedicated so much time and money, and they have a lot of money, but we have the people. We have so many people on our side that they don't have. I know the American Dental Association loves to brag, like we have 160 whatever thousand dental members, and we support water fluoridation. If I got to talk to those 160 some thousand dental members and show them the evidence on fluoride and neurotoxicity and thyroid and bones and kidneys and all that stuff, there's no way that they would sign on to any letter like that. It's like the American Dental Association is just exploiting their membership.
About the public comment, I noticed, for example, that all of you introduced yourselves. I wonder how much thought you put into that, how much time you feel you need to dedicate within your limited amount of time to really establish who you are for them.
It's good, if you have any credentials, whatever you majored in, if you went to school, for engineering or, got a master's in whatever, like people, especially at these meetings, they're impressed by your credentials. But I also don't want to waste too much of my time on credentials. Like, Dr. Hardy Linebeck, he could probably use all 3 minutes just listing off his credentials. Go through your credentials and pick out the most impressive and whatever is most, geared towards whatever.
Most relevant to the topic.
Yes.
Good. And even if you're a mom, the last speaker, she emphasized how important her role as a mom in keeping her household free of toxic chemicals. And I thought that was also good. So Yeah, you introduce yourself and let them know who you are. Personalizes you, gives you some credibility. Also seems to sort of communicate where you're coming from, like why it matters to you in a way, just by saying who you are.
And if you can tie it to any personal story,
Mm.
why you're there or why you care, to kind of like get to the heartstrings of these people. Like, I got into this whole issue because my friend Frankie passed away of osteosarcoma when the Bassin study was being discussed from Harvard on boys developing osteosarcoma. And, that's pretty much my tipping point of like what really led me to all the science was Frankie with osteosarcoma. So that's, people want to hear that kind of stuff as well. And, like Karen is so hypersensitive to fluoride. She cannot wash her vegetables from the grocery store with fluoridated water. She can't go to a restaurant. Hers is just so severe. And there's a lot of people that are probably like that don't even know. I have a coworker. He went to the dentist and had a dental treatment, and he had to go to the emergency room because his throat swelled shut and his eyes and everything. And he had an allergy. So a lot of people, when you're drinking a little bit, you don't notice, but you don't know that's why your tummy is upset or whatever. So for those that have pieced it together, like Karen, that's why I love that she speaks at these events, because people need to know that there are people that are really hypersensitive to certain chemicals. I don't know. Have you ever spoken to Amanda, the PhD pharmacologist? She has a PhD in pharmacology and she's a nurse. Amanda Sleeper. She's really well spoken and she's really cute and she's really highly educated, and she has an allergy to fluoride, or she's intolerant to fluoride.
Wow. What we're saying right now is it's good to introduce yourself with your credentials if you have them, or what your role is. Give it just a little bit of who you are and why you care about it from like a personal point of view, and then also the facts that you're bringing forth. Well, let's do a quick review. So the first thing you do is you look for opportunities to speak, and when you find them, you put them on your calendar, you prepare for them, and in preparing, you find out how many minutes you will get to have. And you write out what you're going to say, and you even rehearse it. You time it, you speak it out loud and see how long it takes to make sure that you finish before your time rather than getting cut off. And then you work with other people to use their 3 minutes to complement your 3 minutes. And then if you have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people, you can really get a whole narrative going. You can get a lot of facts in, and you work with each other to make sure that your public comments are complementary, whether you hit on 1 or 2 of the same items because you want to reinforce them, or if somebody wants to go into deep detail about a particular area, they can do that. Different aspects, having an EPA scientist on one hand and then a mother on another hand, to have some sort of variety is helpful. So what else can we learn from what happened?
So if it's not on the agenda, there's a way you can get it on the agenda. All you got to do is reach out to your local city council person. Most city councils, there's multiple districts. So you find out, you can go to their website. Usually you put in your address and it'll tell you who your city council person is. Reach out to that city council person and say, hey, I would like fluoride on the agenda for discussion. But make sure you're prepared before you do this, because you don't want to just willy-nilly it, because that's what I did in the beginning. And I got a lot of pushback because all the fluoride promoters showed up and they outnumbered me by a lot. So make sure you have your team assembled. And these days with Zoom meetings, it's so easy, or most of these meetings are like half in person and half Zoom. So you can get these people from all over the place. Then you can get PhD scientists to show up to these meetings and speak, and more credentialed people. So it's not just like a bunch of, moms, because sometimes they like to like put down moms. They're like, oh, you're just some mom. Well, moms are the ones that make shit happen. Like moms,
Yay for
So
moms. Are you kidding? Of course. Yeah, they're the ones at the front end of the battle. So that's it. That is an interesting point, though, that if you can get it on the agenda so that it is squarely the topic that you want to talk about. Sometimes it's an adjacent topic, like yesterday was about copper and lead pipes. And because hydrofluorosilicic acid leaches lead from the copper pipes, then you made it relevant. Because I do believe I've seen a lot of public comment where it's part of the rules of the committee that the comments have to be specifically related to the topic at hand. If they have an agenda with, say, like 10 topics in one meeting, when they're on topic number 5, your comment has to be relevant to topic number 5. Oh, they'll cut you off sometimes. Or at the same time, you can be creative in terms of neurotoxic chemicals being voluntarily added to our community water supply. There's a way to make it relevant and say your piece. So that's something to be aware of, right? To kind of customize what you write, what you prepare to say, to make sure that it at least addresses the topic at hand, so they don't have the opportunity to cut you off because it doesn't address the topic at hand.
Mm-hmm. And you also have to make sure you know who makes the decision for fluoride in your city. Because in Green Bay, for instance, in Wisconsin, the city council makes that decision, but in Madison, Wisconsin, it's the water board that makes that decision. So the city council in Madison has nothing to do with it. So you have to, and the water board doesn't really do anything either. They have a technical advisory committee that advises them, and then they do whatever they advise. So you have to like do a lot of research and figure out who made the decision. Why is fluoride in the water? Is it a resolution that the city council made? Because if it's a resolution that they made, then that's a resolution that a new resolution you have to have made to cancel that old resolution or to rescind that resolution.
Very
So
good.
that's an important thing.
Yeah, I mean, let's put it this way, that we need to couch this entire discussion about public comment in a broader campaign, that you, as an activist in your locale committed to ending water fluoridation, can use public comment, period. But it's in and of itself, it's not going to make the difference. But it could be a game changer if you have already ongoing connection or communication or lobbying efforts with individual policymakers, elected and unelected, in your town. So yeah, let's wish people the best of luck with going out there and speaking up in public in front of their elected officials and unelected officials, oftentimes, as part of a holistic campaign to end artificial water fluoridation.
And one of my goals when I go to these meetings to make public comment, my goal is not to win or to succeed, like for them to vote it out that day. That's just not my goal, because that's just not realistic. They're not going to do that usually. My goal is to get as much information on the record for historians, or to make a paper trail for when people look back, because eventually fluoride's not going to be added to the water anymore. You know, it's neurotoxic. There's no putting the genie back in the bottle. We know it's neurotoxic. There's all these other scientists. There's more and more research every day coming out showing it's bad. So I just want to make a nice trail that in the future, somebody is going to look back and go, how the heck did this ever happen? And why did it go on for so long? I want them to be able to look back and go, wow, look at those people. Those people really tried. And, you know, this government agency knew. They knew this and this and this, and they will see when they knew. So that's my big goal right now, is to just archive and document as much as possible with these different governmental agencies. We got the CDC. So there is a public comment right now at CDC that I will talk to you about after this, but, you know, we're going to make comments on that. The EPA, the National Academies of Sciences, there's all these different governmental agencies that you can keep an eye on their meetings and figure out which meetings would be good for making public comment on your topic, or how do you spin your topic to fit whatever they have on their agenda, like we did with the lead at the EPA Advisory Committee on Drinking Water. So don't go in thinking you have to win that day. Let's just get as much on the record and educate as many people as you can, because a lot of these people have never heard this issue before. And, you know, it's all new to them.
Yes, and it's very important that people represent themselves in a professional way. They can bring emotions to it, but don't let the emotions ruin it. And make sure that people represent our movement well. We have a bit of a reputation for being hot-headed or irrational. And yeah, when you confront the reality, it's justifiable that we could lose lose our nerve or lose our cool, should I say, once in a while. But on these occasions when everyone's watching, and a lot of times these are being video recorded and they're placed on the city website forever to be seen forever, we can't afford to have people just walk up, be unprofessional, unprepared, emotional, irrational. Please, if you're going to use public comment, take some time to prepare. Think about what you want to say. Have realistic expectations. Make sure it's part of an overall holistic campaign where you're working with more direct lobbying with your elected or non-elected officials, where you're doing public outreach. Whatever you're doing, make sure that this is just one element of a much broader approach. And then you should have some success on that sense, right?
Make sure you guys dress appropriately. Like I've seen meetings at city councils and stuff where they're talking about legalizing marijuana or something. And I've seen girls show up in crop tops and Daisy Duke shorts to speak at these meetings. Think about how, these people in these meetings are perceiving you. And also you can make some different stipulations with your speakers, like make sure nobody's going to bring up like Nazis or, there's just certain things that you don't, we have never seen evidence that fluoride was put in the concentration camps, to my knowledge. Like I've looked for it, but people always love to use this as a talking point. And I'm like, and they're not the most, well, I don't want to put anyone down, but, just make some ground rules like, okay, we're not going to tie this to vaccines. We're not going to tie this to Nazis, make some rules and make sure people look professional and have manners. Don't swear at your council people. And, they don't really know and all this stuff, and just be polite.
Yeah, there's no advantage to being rude. There's only downside. Good. Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation. And there's just so much wisdom and so much advice you have with the experience over many, many years.
Well, thank you so much, Clint. I really appreciate everything that you do for the movement. And you have been so helpful with your podcast and connecting people and doing stuff like this. So thank you. I really appreciate it. And I know others do as well.
I always tell everybody that the Fluoride-Free activists are the best people in the world. It's just true. I mean, everyone's is there. I could go on. I could go on about how we are, but we're very lucky to have each other. That's for sure.
There's no one else like us on earth.
All right.